He is taken on journeys through different heavens, where he sees the future and receives knowledge about God's plans. These experiences deepen our understanding of why Enoch was so special. His life was filled with divine encounters that enriched his spiritual journey. Enoch's story is significant for several reasons. Firstly, it demonstrates the possibility of living a righteous life even in a corrupt and sinful world. Enoch's faithfulness sets an example for believers to follow. Hebrews 11:5-6 reiterates this by saying, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death." He could not be found because God had taken him away, for before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Enoch's life shows us that a deep personal relationship with God is possible and that it pleases him greatly. Moreover, Enoch's translation to heaven is often seen as a prefiguration of the rapture. This provides hope that believers will ultimately triumph over death and be taken into God's presence. His life is a testament to the rewards of faith and obedience. Enoch's story is not just about his escape from death, but about the kind of life that led to such an extraordinary event. Next we have Elijah, one of Israel's greatest prophets. Elijah's story is set during a turbulent time in Israel's history. The nation was ruled by King Ahab, who, under the influence of his wife Jezebel, led Israel into deep idolatry and the worship of Baal. This was a dark period for Israel, as they had turned away from the worship of the true God. Despite the widespread apostasy, Elijah remained a steadfast servant of Yahweh, boldly proclaiming God's messages to the people. His very name, which means Yahweh is my God, signifies his mission and identity. Elijah was a prophet with a powerful presence. He was known for his boldness and his ability to stand alone against the tide of idolatry. His appearance in 1 Kings 17 is sudden, with no background or introduction, highlighting the abrupt and direct nature of his mission. Elijah's ministry was characterized by miraculous events and powerful demonstrations of God's power. He was not afraid to confront the highest authorities of his time, including King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. His courage and faith were instrumental in turning the hearts of the people back to God. Elijah's life was marked by several extraordinary events. He first appears in 1 Kings 17, where he declares a drought upon the land as a punishment for Israel's sins. This drought lasted for 3.5 years, demonstrating God's power and Elijah's prophetic authority. During this time, Elijah was miraculously sustained by ravens at the brook Cherith, and later by a widow in Zarephath. He also performed the miracle of multiplying her food supply and raising her son from the dead. One of the most dramatic moments in Elijah's ministry was his confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. This event, recorded in 1 Kings 18, was a public showdown between the God of Israel and the false god, Baal. Elijah challenged 450 prophets of Baal to call down fire from heaven to consume their sacrifice. Despite their fervent prayers and rituals, Baal's prophets failed. Elijah then prepared his altar, drenched it with water, and prayed to Yahweh. God answered by sending fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice, the altar, and even the water in the trench around it. This miraculous display led the people to proclaim, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" and resulted in the slaughter of Baal's prophets. Another significant event in Elijah's life was his encounter with God on Mount Horeb. After fleeing from Jezebel's threats, Elijah traveled to Horeb, where he experienced a powerful theophany. God revealed himself not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a gentle whisper. This encounter reassured Elijah of God's presence and purpose, and he received new instructions to anoint new leaders for Israel. Elijah's departure from earth is one of the most spectacular events in the Bible. In 2 Kings 2, we read that Elijah knew his time was near. He journeyed from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and finally to the Jordan River. He was accompanied by his disciple Elisha. Along the way, groups of prophets in each location acknowledged that the Lord would take Elijah away that day. At the Jordan River, Elijah performed a miracle by striking the water with his cloak, causing it to part so that he and Elisha could cross on dry ground. After crossing, Elijah asked Elisha what he could do for him before he was taken away. Elisha requested a double portion of Elijah's spirit, which Elijah said would be granted if Elisha saw him being taken up. As they walked and talked, a chariot of fire with horses of fire appeared and separated them. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha witnessed this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." He then took up Elijah's mantle, symbolizing the transfer of prophetic authority, and began his own ministry. The ascension of Elijah is not just a miraculous event, it's a powerful symbol of divine approval and continuity of God's work. Elijah's departure in a chariot of fire signifies the dramatic end of his earthly ministry and the beginning of Elisha's. It also highlights the theme of divine transportation and transformation, where earthly limitations are transcended. Elijah's life and ascension carry profound significance. His unwavering faith and courage in the face of opposition highlight the power of standing firm in God's truth. Elijah's miracles and his ascension demonstrate God's sovereignty and the reality of his intervention in human affairs. Elijah's story also foreshadows the end-time events described in the New Testament, particularly the rapture and the second coming of Christ. Finally, we have Melchizedek, a figure shrouded in mystery. Melchizedek appears in Genesis 14, after Abraham's victory over the kings who had taken his nephew Lot captive. Melchizedek is described as the king of Salem, which means peace, and as a priest of the Most High God. He brings out bread and wine and blesses Abraham, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." In response, Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything. This acknowledges Melchizedek's spiritual authority. Melchizedek's appearance in the narrative is brief but significant. He is both a king and a priest, a dual role that was uncommon in ancient times. His kingdom Salem is often associated with Jerusalem,